Good morning. おはようございます。Ni hao ma. So this is a very nice day. So my topic is about the hidden Chinese characters and communication among Chinese character-based language users. I am a computer scientist in KAIST. So I just would like to introduce briefly about my personal experience. Around more than 10 years ago, I worked for NEC, a company in Japan, to develop the Japanese-Korean MT system. And then I came back to KAIST around 2000. And then I also involved in English-Korean MT system. And then I have engaged in Korean language processing research. And then finally, around 7 years ago, I was successful to make a CONET for Korean, Chinese, Japanese semantic wordnet to capture some shareable semantics among three languages. And then the Korean Ministry of Culture helped me make a QUOTEN. It is a Korea Terminology Center for Language and Knowledge Engineering. It was a 10-year project. And then I was involved in multilingual terminology centered on the Korean terminology archive and then collection and analysis. And then I am now also secretary of IS 37 SG4 for the standardization of language resource management. And then I was 1 year for president of a Korean Common Science Society and ASEAN NLP and so on. So recent work is about some engineering, natural language engineering from unstructured web text to structured text. It is like information extraction task. So mainly focused on Wikipedia for their resource, for the research. And then I started to think about the multilingual MT system or multilingual synchronization in the context of Wikipedia to make a more balanced information distribution. And then I am now involved in European project about the linked open data, second version. So the current my work is in the context of data web. So now we are now living in the social web. It is we call Web 2.0. But the final goal of web is set to be this semantic web. It is called Web 3.0, but it is hard to achieve this goal technically. So now in the some interim stage to make a more logical web-oriented operation, but it is in the stage of a data web. So my position now in the stage of a data web construction, more semantically. So in this context of Chinese character in the language processing and in our symposium, the first question was, so in Korean text, we cannot see easily the Chinese character, but every Korean user, I think that it's possible to easily recognize the Chinese character in the Korean text. So I put my title as a hidden character in Korean text. So for example, here it is, we pronounce the Hanja, it is Hanzi or Kanji, and it is Hanguk, it is Hanguk, Kanguk or Hangua. But here's the same Han, but we have no Chinese character behind this Korean character. And also this Hangul is a Korean alphabet. This is also pure Korean. So maybe these four words share one first syllable as the same character as Han. But Korean language users is possible to recognize easily what is the Chinese character driven or what is not Chinese character driven. So because so intuitively, we can imagine about some frequency between two characters. So maybe some insight probability of two characters of Han and Ja is very strong for a Chinese character-driven word. But this a particular character, bead or girl, this bead or girl, has no pronunciation in Chinese character. So it is one clue to recognize easily what is the Chinese character driven or not. So the second question is about, is it possible for Korean language users to catch up some meaning in Japanese or Chinese text without learning those languages seriously? Or is it also possible for Chinese or Japanese language users to understand the Korean without serious learning? So I think that I heard that many European language users can easily recognize some approximate meaning of nearby country languages. For example, French people may recognize that some Italian words or Spanish words or even English words, but it's really from the point of Far East Asian countries, it is rather complicated to recognize the other languages, some meaning or even some characters. So what kind of operation maybe make it possible to make more easier understanding or learning of the other languages in this area? So then for the question one, for example, here it is a Korean text, but the pronunciation is like 한자가 한국에서 많이 쓰이지만 한글로만도 가능하다. So if we put the Chinese character here, this one is this one, this one is this one, and this one is the other one is only pure Korean characters. So, but if we can maybe guess the important idea of this sentence, but if we recognize easily what is the Chinese character driven, what is not, I think it is more helpful to, for example, look up the dictionary, and also I think that this one or some important polarity word could be recognized more easily. We can catch up the Korean text more easily. So from the point of engineering, how to recognize more easily what is the Chinese character driven, what is not, is the current problem. And then, so we can easily catch up the pronounced differences in Korean text. Maybe we can measure the probability of Chinese character conditioned by that word. If for the given word, we can easily calculate whether it is Chinese character driven or not by using some famous hidden mark model or subspectral motion. It is NLP tools, I think. And then maybe Korean word segmentation and part of speech tagging problem could be achieved by this kind of character frequency between two characters in the one word. So by using this kind of thinking, we can achieve our first question's solution, and then some partial result is you can find in this web page, and then the source program also open in this SourceForge website. And then for the terminology common and differences, so by achieving the more common understanding among three languages, so I would like to investigate some terminology commons among three languages. So some research is accomplished in this context of a core term. So you can find some information in this website. And then it is physics terminology. So here, this is physics, but it is Japanese. In this moment, I don't have Chinese terminology for this. This is Japanese, but it is Korean terms. So this is just this pronunciation in Korean, this one, yok. But Korean Physics Society want to give more pure Korean terminology for this. This is really pure Korean word. So if we see this, all of this one has in Japanese, this one, this suffix, this prefix. So now current physics society also use this one. This is just corresponding to this one, but they also want to use only pure Korean words. So that means that it is now easily combined pure Korean adjective. The meaning is this one, inverse, and this is the Chinese character-driven one. So physics society want to make a word formation by combining the pure Korean word plus Chinese character-driven word. So it is traditionally it is harder to combine pure Korean adjective plus Chinese character-driven word to make really some terminology. But now, in this moment, many scientists and engineers want to combine the pure Korean word and Chinese character to make a new concept formation. So it is also different things. Also, that is also different Korean word. So, but in this English word, that means that corresponds to a different meaning of, and also finally map to a different word in Korean. This one, and this also some different one, also this different one. So if we go this one, here it is a modifier, this one, like an inverse, and it is a Korean word driven, but in this case, it is Chinese word, Chinese character driven, and but all of the other important word is derived from the Chinese word. So it is the current status of Korean terminology formation. So it is just one picture of this corresponding terminology from English, Japanese, and this Korean word. So in Korean Physics Society, they want to use the two standards. One is for pure Korean driven. The other one is Japanese. The other one is Chinese character driven. This is just the pronunciation of this one, the second one, but it is a Korean driven, pure Korean terminology. So they want to give more priority to the pure Korean driven terminology. So it is the old picture in 1981 from the Japanese book, this one, from this Japanese National Language Institute published some other problems of terminology around 10 years ago. But in this figure, it is some comparison, so overlapping ratio between the specific terminology and everyday word. So their thinking was that if the specific terminology and everyday word overlapped more and more, that language could be more advanced because everyday user can utilize more professional terminology more easily. So that society has more knowledge because everyday word contains the specific terminology. So in Japanese and English, in average, in Japanese text around 10 years ago, the overlapping ratio is below 50%, but for English, it's around 65 something. For the biology term, many biology terms was found in English everyday text. For this is agricultural one, and mechanical engineering, chemistry, and some mathematics. So in English term is now overlapped with everyday language text, more than 50%, but in case of Japanese, it is something is more than 50% in case of architecture and so on, but something is below 50%. So I don't know yet about Korean case or some current stage of terminology usage, but it is some idea about why specific terminology is important, and it should be more localized into their own language, not just using the English, but more local language, for example, Chinese character or some local languages terminology. So terminology in Korean allows the word formation between Chinese origin and pure Korean terms. It was very hard traditionally, but it is now some tendency to make some word formation by using the Chinese character-driven and pure Korean terms. Also now some tendency that the more energetic concept formation by using these two different character types, but the more different direction of Chinese character sharing among CJK languages. So because Korean physics society want to make a more pure Korean terminology, so it is a different direction to share Chinese character-driven terminology. And then I also developed a CONET about the Korean, Chinese, Japanese shared concept WordNet. So here, CONET is a concept-based multilingual WordNet for Korean, Japanese, Chinese, not referencing any English concept, but just only focusing on Japanese, Korean, and Chinese. And then we provide some syntactic structure with some semantic feature for verb and adjective. And the purpose was to resolve semantic ambiguity in the language processing. And the method for construction was by the semi-automatic method utilizing a monolingual machine-readable dictionary and an existing WordNet. Around I started this work from the 1998. At that time, it was hard to utilize the digitalized dictionary. So we put auto paper dictionary into some computer. So it took several years to put all of the dictionary into the computer at that time. So process for CONET development is that first one is a manual selection of a Korean general vocabulary. So we selected the top frequent 50,000 words from the corpus, and then map the word sense of corresponding concept to the existing dictionary. It is so Urimal dictionary is published by a Hangul Society at that time. So we map all of sense to some small different definition of the dictionary, and then finally map all of the sense to the dictionary, and then we could generalize that to the concept. And then we matched with those concept with the Japanese at that time entity provided some semantic network. So we have a shared concept system with the Japanese Goidaike. It was produced by entity for the machine translation purpose. So it is the one picture of the CONET. Here, this is the entry part of speech. This is noun, and then this is homonym number in the dictionary. This is just some word in Korean, and then this one is just some homonym number, and also every sense is mapped to this dictionary definition, and then also mapped to this concept system. Also, this is the hierarchy of some concept system. So we referenced heavily entity Goidaike semantic net. So at least we shared the orderable concept system among Japanese, Chinese, Korean for this purpose. So, for example, it is some friend in English, but they have this kind of shared concept system. And then for the Korean WordNet, we have 2,794 concept nodes, and then we selected 23,000 nouns and so on. So also we provide the syntactic structure, like for example, case frame of the Korean verb and adjective, and then translate all of the verb into Japanese for all of the examples and some occurrence of corpus, because we thought that the Korean verb is translated Japanese in the different manner. We thought that we have to divide the sense into more number of sense, more number of concept, because if the Korean word translated Japanese differently, it should be some symptom to divide the more senses. So it is some example of the concept we just temporarily translate into English. And then, for example, in Korean word, this one has two concepts. One is this just going. The other one is communicate, transfer some information. So in this case, we searched all of the examples from the corpora and then translate into Japanese for the comparison of the sense difference between Korean and Japanese. This is a web-based system. Also, this is a Korean noun system, but it is a Korean verb system, and so on, Korean adjective. In case of Chinese WordNet, we referenced Peking University Chinese Grammar Information Dictionary. So the number of vocabulary is just limited to the vocabulary in this dictionary. And then also for the verb, we referenced this one. It is for high school students language teaching purpose. So it contains only basic one. So we also developed our Chinese corresponding concept system by using this one. And for example, this one has 4 different meaning and mapped to 4 different concept. For example, so each chair has some more different many instances of a word in Chinese. So this is the Chinese Korean verb translation for processing Chinese to Korean empty system, for example, and is a conet of Chinese. For difficulties is that some Chinese word has no Korean corresponding word. So in this case, we just remain the Chinese word just as it is. So principles was that Korean has been constructed by the following principles, or the sense mapping to concept by using the corpus, and it is a multilingualism, but we don't want to link it to English, but just investigate Chinese, Japanese, Korean corpus. So I believe that 3 languages must have some shared concept. So sense mapping, for example, it has some multi-facet hierarchy and so on. So here it is a corpus-based usage and multilingualism. So summary is that what difficulties must be overcome. The difference should be kept. Difference of mentality of culture and lexical system. So we found that there are many shared one, but we also found some differences among 3 languages. So it is published in this book, and then it's Chinese to Korean lexical WordNet. Also, you can download all of the things this web page. The last one is some cultural thinking. So I just briefly explain about some terminology difference or terminology commons, and then some concept commons, concept difference. But recently, I started investigating the Wikipedia usage of languages. So as you know, Wikipedia has multilingual links in this area. For every English or every English page has some link to the other languages. But there are many differences. For example, here is a Microsoft in English, but in Korean page, very small information. And then also we have Korean web page has different content, for example. And also Dennis Rich has also different things, and even the summarized box has nothing in Korean. So I thought that I tried to translate or synchronize between English and Korean, but their information content was not the same. So it is beyond translation. So we have to find what is important in some language, what is not different in some other languages. So after investigating these differences, then so I'll skip here. So cultural sync means that if we consider this information content of every languages, for example, for the badminton, English web page has 50,000 words, but for French, 26 words, Korean, only 22,000, for Chinese, 19,000 words to explain what is badminton. But it is a Korean, some location name. Korean web page has much more information, but the other language has very few. So that means that depending on the language, the explanation of the word should be different. For example, the autism has different characteristics depending on the words, depending on the languages, Spanish, French, Chinese, Korean. They have a different one, some interesting. So I think that some information common could be here, but we have to consider some cultural difference for this purpose. So conclusion is that Chinese character origin Korean words can be easily recognized. So hidden Chinese characters in Hangul text could be easily recognized. So, and word segmentation and part of speech tagging in Korean, maybe in another dimension. Also, it is easily recognized the Chinese character-driven word. So I think that also we can share and then Chinese character translation is more easier. And terminology in Korean allows the word formation between Chinese origin and pure Korean terms. So the more energetic concept formation in this tendency, but the more different direction of Chinese character sharing among CJK language users. So it is more problematic for the Chinese character-driven sharing. And shared concept scheme in CJK could be achieved with some different word instance. And Wikipedia examples, each language society has different cultural perspectives, but could be learned each other in open space in the cyber or physical communication. Thank you very much.